And welcome back to the Texas Longhorn football channel. I am your host, Anwar Richardson, with my main man, Ari Temkin. Hey, man, this man who's got 5, 6, 7 jobs, right? I only have like 1 or 2, and Ari's got like 7. Well, he's got 1 less because the Cowboys have lost. So I guess, I don't know, you're going to have to supplement that, right, Ari, at some point?
The funny thing is, like, some of the people I work with in the Cowboys are like, so what are you going to do now in the offseason? It's like, well, I got a few other things I do. So.
Well, yes. Here's the thing, Ari, too. I did the NFL for years. There's no such thing as an offseason in the NFL. I mean, when you consider, right now you'll have like Senior Bowl practices that'll get started. The combine will come. You'll have all-season workouts that get started. The NFL draft after that. I mean, more workouts than training. I mean, like it never does stop. So
the NFL is so brilliant in the way that they've designed their offseason because only one team can win a Super Bowl. But remember, 31 teams can win the offseason.
Yes.
I mean, in some ways, the offseason is more compelling than the regular season for a lot of teams. Like, I mean, think about the Lions. Like, Lions fans were basically the entire season was preparation to get to the offseason. So, yeah,
yes.
You're right. It goes from the Super Bowl to the Senior Bowl, to the Combine, to draft prep, free agency starts,
free agency.
Draft, schedule announcement. I mean, It's just one non-event after the other that sort of colors the offseason. And Anwar, interestingly enough, college football is now dipping its toe in the same water.
Yeah, when it comes to the transfer portal, because it used to be just recruiting, and now the transfer portal has made that thing pretty interesting. Schedule releases and what dates and everything like that. You are absolutely right. But hey, all right, before we get too far down off it, let me make sure. I think I forgot to do this one of the last videos. Click like. Click subscribe, and do us a favor, by the way. You guys always share things on Facebook. Yeah, I'm on Facebook. I see things that people share. I hate the majority of it, unless it's like family updates. So why don't you take this video and share it with everyone? By the way, I am here in Durango, Colorado, as I'm filming, and Ari and I, we're going to have a real fun topic for you as Ari steps away from the screen for some odd reason. But I'm here in Durango, Colorado on a family vacation, a working vacation. That's okay. A working vacation, Ari, with something about that seems a little bit wrong. I have to address this when I get back. Let's say at the beautiful Purgatory ski resort. I had a lot of fun with the family flying home today on Tuesday. Ari, that being said, this is the week where Texas gets ramped up, as we talked about, as you were alluding to, for off-season conditioning. The off-season conditioning program for University of Texas gets started this week. Classes get started this week. This is kind of like, to your point, Ari, off-season stories that we start to transition into. And clearly the biggest thing as we start this week will be everything what we hear about as far as Quinn Ewers are concerned. Now, a lot of this is going to be workouts, but there will be some football things that are done throughout this week. There's also like employee installations throughout the winter conditioning as they start to head into spring football. So we start thinking about Quinn, Ari. What becomes the thing in your head that you want to start hearing about Quinn Ewers in January and February and heading into March? Like, what's the thing that Ari says, all right, if I start hearing this, then I know this is a good sign?
Well, there's so many thoughts in my head swirling about Quinn Ewers, as it pertains to like perceptions of him, how much different is it now versus, if he didn't go to Ohio State last year and he was coming out of high school right now and he had gone to Texas. Like, I find that stuff to be so intriguing. Like, what would the perception be of Quinn now if, again, he had committed to Texas, he spent his senior year at high school at Southlake Carroll, and then now is at Texas versus what the perception of is him now? What did the year at Ohio State mean for him in terms of the perception, in terms of his experience level? Like, what did he gain from that? Was that good for him? Was it better, and would it have been a better experience to do that last year of high school, at Southlake Carroll, and go try to win a state championship like that? Those are some of the things I'm thinking about in terms of your question specifically. And I do want to get your thoughts on what I just brought up, but I mean, I'd say from a leadership standpoint, I think that's what this part of the offseason is about when it comes to a brand new quarterback. It's about, galvanizing that locker room. It's about that locker room buying into you as the guy, which they probably already have, but now it's about you reinforcing that through your actions throughout the offseason. You've got to be the hardest worker. You got to be the first guy in, last guy out kind of thing. You've got to have your teammates notice that, because nobody's going to follow a guy that, like, at this point, Quinn Ewers, like the reputation around him isn't great, right? I mean, we've got a guy that's like money grabbing and all he cares about is money and blah, 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 which shouldn't be a bad thing. In every other area of our society, it's fine. But in college football, for some reason, it's not. But I just think in terms of that locker room, like, there's a lot of things that those guys that don't know him know about him. And so for him, it's about galvanizing that locker room, leadership, those kinds of things.
Yeah, I would think so. And the interesting thing that I've heard about Quinn, we'll get back to the other thing that you brought up, Ari. So just put a push pin in there and remind me to go back to that. He's viewed. Everyone says he's more of a quiet person. It's been described to me as more of a quiet, humble kind of guy who doesn't talk a lot. So it'd be interesting because they actually in that locker room, Hudson Card has also been described as quiet. Like he doesn't talk, and then Quinn doesn't talk that much either. So now Maalik Murphy apparently is going to be the talker. Apparently he's the guy that doesn't mind talking at all times. So it's going to be interesting. Like two of the lead dogs are going to be the guys who probably say the least. And it's very interesting because when Sarkisian was asked about that last season, he felt like a guy could lead by being a quiet person, mainly because, every offense is fast-paced. So it's not necessarily getting in a huddle and, all right, guys, you need to do this to this break. The old school football that we grew up on, as you know, that's not what they do. I mean, it's this.
From under center, basically.
Yes, exactly. There's not a lot of time for talking and communicating and all that rah-rah speeches and all that type of stuff. That's just not what today's football entails. So from a leadership standpoint, Sarkisian feels like he doesn't worry about if a guy's vocal or not. It's a benefit. At times it wants to be more vocal, but it is not necessarily like the deal breaker in Sarkisian's mind, and especially as a former quarterback. But it will be interesting as he walks into that locker room with the hype. He is the guy that comes in and whatever band you want to say, it's the Beatles or you want to say it's, I don't know. I feel like if I put any other band up there, Mullet Mania, right? When Mullet Mania walks in there, people are going to want to know, okay, well, what's this guy about? We've heard everything about you for years. So to your point, since high school, you've heard about this guy since high school. Even if you've been in the state of Texas, you've heard about this guy. Even after you're at UT, now it's going to be like, all right, well, what can you do? How do you lead through example? How do you lead through workouts, right? I mean, how do you show guys like, hey, we're going to go above and beyond for a program that, let's be honest, Ari, program needs a leader, right? I mean, it's safe to say after 5-7 and everything that we saw, I'm not wrong by saying this program really needs a leader to step up.
No question, a leader and a face. I mean, Sam Ehlinger, at the very least, provided a face to this program that people be like, oh, yeah, I know Texas because of this. And at this point, I don't know that I think Quinn Ewers might be the face of Texas, but not necessarily a good way. It's funny you bring up that he's known as sort of a quiet leader because the perception of him is so much different. Like quiet and humble are not words I would use my perception to describe him, because you think like, oh, he's got this mullet, like that's a guy that looks for attention. The car commercial he did in Columbus, like those are things where it's like, oh, okay, he looks, like a guy that's outgoing. So it's kind of interesting to see that like the actual perception of him is much different. He's actually quiet and humble. And look, I think we talk in sports about leadership all the time. It manifests itself in so many different ways. And so, yeah, you don't have to be necessarily a loud, rambunctious leader. I just think that this is the part of the offseason where you're laying the foundation as a quarterback and especially given a situation where it's up for grabs. And it's like, you've got to now be the guy leading the charge throughout the workouts, whether that's, outwardly, emotionally, or it's just like, hey, look at how hard Quinn Ewers is working on a daily basis. We're all just trying to get there. But it really is just about getting that locker room to follow you. And I think that's an important component of leadership of the quarterback position, regardless of how it manifests itself or the different ways in which it manifests itself.
Yeah, Ari, the thing is, it's interesting when you talk about like the perception of maybe Quinn being this, braggadocious, kind of loud, whatever kind of person. I'll be honest with you, I don't know what his voice sounds like.
Right. Me either.
I don't know if I've ever heard him speak. If Sam Ellinger's voice somehow came on like right, I'd like, oh, that's Sam Ellinger. If Casey Thompson, I'm like, oh, that's Casey Thompson. I literally don't know what this guy's voice sounds like. I don't know if he's got a Southern drawl. I don't know if he's got a British accent. I think there's been a lot of things written about him. I really don't know. I mean, there may have been a lot of things that yeah, he does. I'm like, oh, snap. I didn't know Quinn was from the islands. Wow. I did not know, and maybe you just like, he dreads up the mullet at some point, right? He just dreads it up, you're like, wow, I didn't see that coming, right? So that's the only thing when people start talking about that, I'm like, I don't know on that one. Let's go back to, you had an original point though, Ari. I want to go back to that. I told you to put a pin in that. What was that? Because I want to make sure I address that.
So like, I'm just curious about like, all right, what's the expectations? What's the perception? And then, what's the reality? Like, would Quinn Ewers have been better off spending last year at high school and trying to help Southlake Carroll win a state championship? Was he better off going to Ohio State, get the experience that he did in Columbus and working with Ryan Day and being in that offensive meeting room? Or was it a waste? And then, what's the perception of him if he's coming in as this 5-star prized freshman quarterback? Is it like, oh man, can't wait to see what this kid does? And where are those expectations and perceptions of him now after spending 1 year in Columbus? Because it seems like the feeling on Quinn Ewers as a football player has diminished in terms of like this, he was Arch Manning to a certain degree. Obviously not with the same name, but he was a big time prospect that many people thought was the next best thing at quarterback. And so is that still there in terms of perceptions, and then the reality of it in terms of like, so there's a lot there, I guess. Take it wherever you want, Anwar.
Well, here's the thing, Ari, like as far as him, that last year, the high school year, right? I think there'll be trailblazers, right? And I think 8 years from now, 10 years from now, guys will be skipping their senior years of high school and we won't think anything of it, right? It's just that it's so new to us that it's so like, it's like a shock to our system and everyone's clutching their pearls. I'm like, oh my God, like you're quitting on your team. Like, I cannot believe that. It's kind of like when guys started skipping the bowl games, right? And Leonard, I think it was like Leonard Fournette and Christian McCaffrey were kind of like the two big names that skipped the bowl game. And everyone's like, oh my God, no team is going to draft them. No team is going to want them. They've quit on them. And here we are a few years later, and you're like, man, why are you playing in a bowl game? Right? I mean, our perception of bowl games have changed. Like, there's still a couple of people who hold on to it, right? And still say, man, we've got to, you should play for the game. But for the most part, look, artists of a guy's like, I'm skipping the Cheez-It Bowl because I want to focus in on the NFL. No one's upset with that. So I think years from now, when it happens, I don't think it's going to be like the shock to the system. It's just Jaden Blue did it. Quinn Ewers did it. I think we'll get used to that as time goes along. He gets to Ohio State. There's, he was fourth on the depth chart, at that point. I think there was a walk-on who was ranked above him at some point. And so there became like the questions of, is he really the savior? And then that becomes the quote unquote not. But I don't know if you can judge him fairly off of being on campus for less than a year. I don't know how somehow, some way within less than a year, now all of a sudden it's like, well, he ain't that guy. Right. He was still the guy. But yes, there was a depth chart. There's small little things that needs to be worked out. But I think if you believe in Steve Sarkisian and what he's able to do with quarterbacks, And you still believe that the potential that he had and showed in high school, I don't think that went away. Everyone still says he's got an NFL arm. Everyone still says that, he can make all the throws. And just because it didn't happen in one place doesn't necessarily mean it can't happen here at Texas. So, the only thing for me, Ari, and I want to get your thoughts on this, with all the talk about Quinn, are we doing Hudson a disservice? Are we doing Maalik Murphy a disservice, right? Because there is the mullet mania, right? There is the stuff that we're talking about Quinn here. I mean, we are all, everyone's all chips in on that. But are we sleeping on Hudson Card? Like, could there be a point where we're like, maybe doesn't overtake Hudson Card, and maybe Hudson Card is the opening day? So we're assuming Quinn will be, and we're assuming it's a matter of when as opposed to if. But are we doing the other guys a little bit of a disservice?
And what was said to Quinn about playing time? That's intriguing to me too.
Ari, it's not like the pitch was, hey, come in here and compete and see what happens, right? There had to be some more assurances in that, correct?
Well, and then we know about the name, image, and likeness money that's coming his way too. And so, like, what were the promises made associated with that? And so, like, we always want to live in a world in which the coach is going to say, hey, compete and the best guy gets the job. And there's always been extra nuggets and things that are said from coaches to try to coax recruits to coming there. But it's a different world now when money's involved and we're talking about name, image, and likeness. And, hey, this guy's promoting our product and we expected him to be the starter. So, man, I think there's so much there in terms of, like, how much wiggle room does Sark truly have? Has he done that to himself where he's kind of painted him into a place to say, Quinn's got to be the starter? And you hope that there's nobody that just, like, jumps ahead where it's, like, so obvious that Maalik Murphy is so much better or that Hudson Card is so much better that he can't, it's almost like he's making a decision to the detriment of his team.
The last thing I'll say, Ari, and I'll wrap up because I know my internet's a little bit sketchy here. The interesting thing is if Hudson does that, or Maalik does, if you're a Texas fan, you might think the thing is you might feel like you might be in a really good situation, because if we think of, like, this is the guy and this is going to be the gold standard and someone exceeds what we believe the gold standard to be, then, you gotta have faith that Sarkisian, this won't be another Hudson Card, Casey Thompson situation where he names a guy and then two games later, he has to go in a different direction. But you would think that no matter what, they should be in a good situation. But yeah, for me, one of my final thoughts here is, I still want to see the leadership component. I want to hear about the leadership component. We know there's going to be a battle that's going to go take place between, all three of the guys. Maalik Murphy has definitely shown and really proved a lot of skeptics wrong with his senior year and everything that he was able to do. I was one of the guys who was a little bit skeptical of him because I hadn't seen him do anything in high school. And so for me, I wasn't really concerned about what he did in camps. I wanted to see you do it when it counted. And when he did it, I mean, he did the damn thing, led his team to state championships. So Maalik checks the boxes for me. Got no more questions for you. Won't doubt you again. But it's still for me, Quinn, what he does. The leadership that he establishes. He already started working out with guys even before he got there. He started bringing guys together and getting them, and throwing with them. So you can see a little bit of it. Ari, we just need to see more of it going forward. What's your final thought on this, Ari?
No, and look, I loved you and Ketch had a really good conversation, I think, a few weeks ago about how much negligence to a certain degree is Sark responsible for when it comes to quarterback position. And look, I think it's fair to give him a pass. And I think from the Dallas Cowboys perspective, like, there's a similar dynamic here from Mike McCarthy, where when McCarthy's hired, there are legitimate question marks about him as a head coach. And so he's got the first year, which is kind of a pass, even though maybe it shouldn't have been. But then this year, it's kind of like, okay, some of the questions we had when he was hired, those questions remain. And I'd say the same is true for Sark. Like, we can all be reasonable and say, like, Sark can get a pass for year one. But now into year two, where there's much more talent at the quarterback position, now it's on, like, this is your bread and butter, Sark. It's on you to prove that this is what you can do. If you're going to prove to everybody else that you're a better coach than 500 Sark that a lot of people think you are.
Hey, if you enjoy this, one more time, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Ari and I will probably be back on Wednesday with another video. I think Kedge is off for the rest of the week, so just be me kind of holding it down. I'll be back in beautiful Cedar Park, but Ari will be here. And so until we talk again, subscribe, like. You guys take care. Don't really have the best outro. You guys take care. I'll talk to you soon. See you.
Safe travels, Anwar.
All right. Thank you, buddy.